Okay, this is one of my first projects. It was a collaborative project for my ETC 511 class. But what was my focus was I was in charge of what it meant to be a cyborg in art, and truthfully, like it came to be like how it fits into digital citizenship as an identity is as we move to kind of modify our senses and have all these digital enhancements um, or appendages, how does that affect our identity, and are we changing who we are and what it means to be human, or are we just extending that? So, um, you know, um, I'll just keep I'll just keep moving forward. So, um, part of what I think is really interesting is there's this Neil Harbison guy, and he has this implant where he's listening to color, and his partner Moon Rivas is she can feel seismic vibrations. So these are enhancements that they've added, and the big question is like, do should they be considered cyborgs? So then I worked with a local artist that I work with, Remy Shu, um, just to kind of figure out like, is technology changing the way that the reality is experienced, um, or is it making the reality? So, what I found really interesting is by featuring Remy Shu, who some could argue is a cyborg artist, in a series of interviews, he kind of went about and answered a lot of these questions. So I think that's the kind of the most interesting part of the artifact is this page is that he doesn't think he's a cyborg. So I asked him a series of questions was, do you feel like digital technology is different than other artistic tools? Do you think that has dramatically changed artistic practice? Um, and then it talks about just modifying body, right? So in the end, the kind of conclusion, and it's built so you can kind of we can kind of um, derive our own opinions, but the conclusion was, and I think this is kind of the important part, is if artistic tools can help artists portray experience or portray and experience their reality, then art is not a thing and it's a way, and really it's about dig- the digital world and digital places and these third spaces. Um, they enable us to kind of portray our realities differently and experiment with our realities and experiment with the way we interact with the world, but it's still all about the process, and perhaps more, it's becoming more about the process because as these devices get more experiential, it's less about the artifact and more about the process. And I think that has a big connotation in education where we seem to be so hung up in the fact that um, art, or that there should be an artifact of learning, and we don't know how to have an assessment that's really based on process. And in a way, we aren't like, it doesn't seem like we're concerned with the process, but arguably, if you think of art and learning and the construction of knowledge in a very similar way, I think it's really important to recognize that the learning process is probably more important than the product. And these digital technologies that are kind of creating cyborg learners, for lack of better words, are changing the way that process looks, and perhaps allowing us as educators to document that process more than we could have before. For instance, right now I'm documenting my process through this screencast, whereas before it would have just been kind of a typed summary, but I'm able to show you the process of how I'm thinking. That's it.